All right, welcome back, everyone, to Black Bull Podcast. Today we got Mental Ben. I don't even know your real name. You just go by Mental Ben.
Ben Adams.
Just Ben Adams.
Yeah, my full name is Benjamin William Adams, if you must ask. So,
okay, all right.
That's my screen credited name, actually. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
IMDb stuff or what?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
shit. Yeah, look him up, guys. So he's a excellent illustrator. If you're watching the video right now, you can see he's just got all of his illustrations all over our table and around us. We actually met him at the Upper Playground. What was the name of the show? Frightmares?
Frightmares,
yeah. The Frightmares show, and I loved his artwork. I had to talk to him.
Yeah. It's good talking to you.
Yeah. So a little bit about your style. I mean, where does it come from? Because it's super illustrative, but you also have colored pencil work. You have gouache work. You got such an array, like your abilities.
Yeah, a myriad of... Yeah, I just have always, I knew since I was 3 years old I wanted to be an artist, I always wanted to be like my dad, who was an artist. He was more of a commercial artist. Mm-hmm. But, I just always had a love for art. My mother and stepfather are both artists.
Was he making creepy stuff like this, though?
That was from the Frightmares, right?
No, my dad did more like kind of nice pastel drawings and portraits of old Indian women and, nice things. But, a lot of that comes from... I've recently discussed a lot of this with my stepdad because my parents got divorced when I was about 8. And so my stepdad came into my life in probably, we're going to start dating things quickly here, but probably like 1978, 79. And he brought all of his like record collection and his fairy magazines and books by Brian Froud, a lot of 70s fantasy art. And, I was introduced to Black Sabbath and a lot of, Alice Cooper. And so he kind of brought in that little dark light into me.
So you were young.
Yes.
Getting all that introduced to you. That's
young.
great.
Yeah. Early age. And also, I grew up in the woods. We grew up next to 300 acres of forest back in the 70s when Bigfoot was coming around to, knock you up and stuff. And
that's where you based that sculpture off of.
Yeah, probably a little bit, yeah. But, so just, growing up in the woods when you're a kid in the 70s, pre-cell phone, pre-internet, you had books, music, the radio, and your imagination. And usually I would just sit and draw or ride bikes with my buddies and talk and make up stories. And, a lot of creativity comes from that, my youth, my childhood.
So when I first met you, I remember you mentioning to me that huge...
Oh,
what do you call it? The big skeleton that was at the Portland Art Museum in the front of the Leica exhibit.
Yeah.
You had an influence on that, or tell us about what you did with that.
Yeah, okay, so that was the Odokuru. I'm probably totally messing that name up, but it's basically a giant 200-foot tall skeleton that used to just destroy men, and guys would try and kill him, and they'd lose their swords in his skull, and he would just devour them. Yeah, so I used to work at Leica Animation Studios, and it was a story that Shannon Tyndall had created, and in the script it called for this 200-foot tall skeleton, and we do puppet movies, and so all the puppets are to scale. And so like a normal human being would be, 9 to 10 inches as a puppet, but this thing had to be hundreds of feet tall. So we actually made a 22-foot tall one. And I was the lead sculptor on it and got to sculpt all the face and the arms and the ribs. And it was a pretty crazy project. We had a huge team of like amazing people on it. And Nelson Lowry was like a huge influence in the design. And like I said, Shannon Tyndall kind of came up with the character. But it's based on the old... Japanese illustration, the guy that did the giant wave, the Japanese the wood block drawings. I'm failing to remember his name right now, but
I forget too.
But that artist did a drawing, and there's this giant skeleton kind of creeping into a room, and these guys are just like, "Oh my god, giant skeleton!" So, but that was really fun to make.
The glowing eyes.
Yeah, glowing eyes. There's actually pork chop bones in the face.
What?
That I snuck in there. Yeah, there's a little Vietnamese restaurant by the Hillsborough Airport that I used to go to all the time, and they make amazing pork chops. And one day I was there with a couple other guys, and we ate a bunch of pork chops, and I ended up going, "Hey guys, can I have all your pork chops?" And I brought them into work, and then I forgot them on my desk for about 2 weeks, and they grew about 2 inches of mold.
Oh my gosh!
So I baked them, and I scraped them and cleaned them, and then I stuck them in the face of this thing, and didn't tell anyone until about 2 months after they started filming. So that was kind of fun.
So you have an immense like sculptural background, but you're such a great illustrator. I mean, how did that come to be? Like, were you a sculptor before illustrator, or how'd that happen?
Okay.
Did you go to school for art? Also?
I did,
Lots
yes.
of questions at once.
Yeah, well, going back to the skeleton being at the Portland Art Museum, what was cool about that for me personally was I started going to art school in 1987 at Pacific Northwest College of Art.
There we go.
And it was actually part of the Portland Art Museum. So the actual part of the museum right now, that's when you first walk in, there's a sculpture court there. And that whole section on the west side was all the art school. 4 floors from the basement all the way to the 3rd floor. And so I went there as an illustration major and from 87 to 89. And then I dropped out because I ended up getting a job at Will Vinton Productions, the home of the California Raisins. And that was my first official job. And so before then, I was pretty set on being an illustrator. And when I started working there, I was surrounded by all these people making clay animated movies and TV shows and commercials, and was like, hey, I kind of think I should learn how to sculpt. So I basically, with the help of a couple of people there, with guidance, I basically taught myself to sculpt in about 6 months. And one of the first sculptures I ever did there was actually a Michael Jackson raisin that was actually given to Michael Jackson as a gift.
Oh my gosh.
So that was no pressure for like first time sculptor after 6 months.
Wow.
Dang. Yeah, so Michael Jackson, before he died, had some of my, I don't know if we can swear here.
No,
Yes,
do
you
whatever
can.
want. Yeah.
He has some of my shit in his place.
That's dope.
So
So what was your
MJ.
stint like
Crazy.
at Leica? Like how long were you there?
well,
I mean,
okay, so we can jump around a little bit, but yeah. So my first job was working at Will Vinton's doing claymation, and I was actually a graphic designer at the time. So I was hired on to be a graphic designer, help with photo shoots, doing video case cover, VHS covers for the shows when they came out, doing graphic design. But I was really drawn to the animation and the 3D aspect of it, and so. I am totally losing track of the question you asked.
actually,
but,
I screwed it up because I keep associating Will Vinson with Leica, and this
so
is before
I left.
Leica was a thing.
Yeah, so I ended up after about a year there, I ended up hating it
Yeah.
because I didn't like my boss, even though I love him now. Bill, if you're out there, you're cool. But I just really didn't like it, and I quit. And this will kind of segue into something else. But I ended up doing an internship after that at Disney in Florida. So. Fast forward to about 2006, a bunch of other stuff happened. We'll probably go into later, but I ended up back at Leica as a development artist on the movie The Box Trolls. Wow! So that was kind of fun, and the whole company was primarily working on the movie Coraline. If anyone out there likes Coraline, I know there's a few people. I think it's pretty cool, but so everyone was working on that movie. I couldn't actually get on it because I was working at another company in town doing animation. But they were like, hey, we're working on this new movie called The Box Trolls, and we need somebody to work. And, my name got brought up, and so I went in, and that's kind of what started my 10-year stint at Leica, was going back with that.
Damn, it's a long time. So you were a pretty integral part of the company?
I mean, it's a huge team of people. I mean, I felt pretty privileged to be part of the development team because I got to actually help work on the movies when they were very first starting out, literally
cool.
reading a script, just pages, letters on a page, and going, hey, let's make, what does this thing look like?
Yeah.
Being part of that team.
So you're just helping the visual design from the beginning, essentially?
Exactly.
That's great. I mean, that's got to feel good.
Yeah.
But do you think that's sometimes difficult? Because I know a lot of creatives, they need parameters. And when you're looking at a script, it's like it could be anything.
That's where I like it the best.
I like
Wide
that
open,
too.
blue sky.
Yeah.
Yeah. I worked. I keep mentioning Nelson Lowry because he was somebody I kind of met later in my career, but had a really big influence on me at Leica, and he definitely likes to go blue sky, but sometimes he likes to work within really strict parameters, and that is actually kind of fun too because you can really isolate what you're doing and really think about it and analyze it. And not get too crazy, because sometimes you can get too crazy and just shotgun it. Mm-hmm. And that definitely happens on movies and projects I've worked on. But I think in the beginning you want to go shotgun, and then you want to start narrowing your focus as you go. So both methods definitely have their benefits.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you're so interested in 3D stuff because we kind of met you because of your illustrations and your illustrating. Do you do more illustrating now?
Up until a couple years ago, I primarily was sculpting. At Leica, my main focus actually was sculpting puppets.
Let's bring that out, the sculpture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to the Vinton thing, this is I don't know.
Yeah, hold it up to the camera. This one right here in front of you.
Yeah. So okay, let's go back to 1989, 1990 when I'm first learning how to sculpt and sculpting the claymation style, which is the big goofy hands, Mickey Mouse hands, and Converse shoes and California raisin style. That was how I taught myself to sculpt, but this was actually the first sculpture I started doing on my own, learning how to do a more realistic style. And I've had a big love of Japanese model kits for a long time. And I think at the time, Pitt was kind of a big thing, the Pitt comic book character. So this character is definitely influenced by that. But, I've always been interested in muscles and teeth and gnarly and kind of evil. I either like cute, scary, or sexy. Like that's kind of my wheelhouse. So this kind of fit more into that scary thing. But this was me teaching myself how to do fine details and do muscles, working, trying to get some torque and dimension. But yeah, this was like literally one of the first 3 sculptures I ever sculpted in a fairly realistic fashion. So you can see it's still a little cartoony, but yeah.
So when I look at your sculptures, it almost translates over to your illustrations. I mean, a lot of your illustrations, they look like characters that could be sculptures. I mean, how is that process for you when you think of an idea, or if you're reading a script? How do you come up with the visuals for that? And what's that process like? I'm foreign to the sculpture or even like the animation development character world. So
I think it is an interesting question because sculpture for a lot of people is kind of a little bit of a, it's like, how does that happen? For me, I think starting as an illustrator was a benefit for me because drawing is basically tricks of the eye. Drawing is line, shading, shapes, values, tones. It's all tricks. There's not an actual person on that page. There's not actually a clown on that page. There's not a flying monkey there. It's all just pigment. And you're seeing it because I've tricked you into thinking there's something there other than a flat surface. So when you learn all those techniques and you learn how to draw, paint, do values, renderings, you've already kind of learned how to think in 3D, even though you're not doing 3D, you're doing 2D. So when I picked up a ball of clay, I kind of knew where I wanted to push that piece of clay to make it look like something. Or if somebody learns how to sculpt first and they were a really amazing sculptor, but they don't necessarily know drawing techniques, I think it's harder to be an illustrator or a drawer if you started sculpting first because it's all tricks. If you're sculpting something, you push your finger in there, it's going to make a hole.
Isn't that true with, sorry to cut you off, but isn't that true with filmmaking too? Like people who draw tend to be better cinematographers?
Well, I think people that draw are just kind of more awesome in general. Myself, but I mean...
Well, it's like the basics of visual art. And then so trying to go out from that, it's like, you're starting from... You're training yourself for the bigger things, like sculpting. I think
what you're getting at is the idea of like composition for film, especially like people who draw understand composition a little more because you have a piece of paper.
Well, that's all you're thinking about is composition to start with. Yeah, composition is huge in drawing, unless all your characters are off to the side over here, in like the corner, and you're not, or if that's intentional.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But we're as an illustrator, I guess you're constantly thinking about character. You're thinking about storytelling. You're thinking about composition. You're thinking about lighting, shading. You're thinking about all the things that go into film except for movement, and more of a continued story. But yeah, it's basically like if you look at Hitchcock, he's a perfect example. The guy would storyboard everything, and then he's like, "Well, what is this going to look like in film?" It's like, "Well, I just drew it all out, put the people in place of those characters, have them do their lines, make sure it's lit nice, cameras in focus, and it's all there." That's why comic books are so great too, because they're basically picture versions of stories or movies. That's why it's a pretty nice translation when you get a great comic book movie, because it's already been boarded and thought out.
For sure. You mentioned lighting, and I've never really thought about lighting in animation set.
Oh yeah.
I mean, same principles, but smaller.
But smaller, yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, it doesn't. We've done 2D animation, but not 3D, right? So
right.
It's like, but we don't think about the lighting as much. But when you do, I've messed with 3D animation programs, and lighting is one of the biggest components of doing that.
Oh yeah.
Well, and just by saying the word program too, that's a different ball of wax versus like
I've got a sculpture actual sculptures lighting. Yeah, well, that's even bigger.
Yeah, because
it seems like a fun thing. Because I mean, I light photography and I do some film work too, and the lights, you're limited at the strength and power of your lights at times.
Yeah.
But when you have smaller sets, I feel like you can like get away with a lot.
Well, and the weird thing is you're not just setting it up for capturing one moment. You're setting up to capture thousands of moments.
Right.
And if in the old days, if you have a set that's made out of clay and you put bright lights on it, you know what happens to clay when you put heat on it?
It melts.
It melts. So that's, with Leica, most of their sculptures aren't really clay. They're silicone and metal and fabric and lots of, crazy things that make it animatable. But imagine lighting a set and having, shooting a scene for maybe 3 weeks, and you've got maybe 40 lights set up with gels and all this, and either something gets bumped halfway through a scene or a light burns out or starts to fade out.
Right.
And in the old days, before you could really see everything, you had to shoot on film, use little pointers, move things.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't necessarily know that until you got your film back because it had to be developed. But that was before video playback. So, things nowadays with computers, your lights are always on inside the computer, so you don't deal with that. But it's crazy, man. Lighting's a killer. That's why good lighters are pretty amazing.
Yeah, it just seems like so different than what I'm used to. We had a friend, Ava Shore, who did this film about a guy who made a power glove.
Okay.
Have you seen this?
It's a documentary.
I haven't.
It's a short doc about a guy who like programmed a power glove to sync up with the shutter of the cameras he was working with, so that he could animate, click.
It was this old discontinued Nintendo device. It was literally like a glove that you would use your other hand to. It was the terrible idea, right? But this guy somehow.
Brilliant.
I thought it was pretty rad. I mean, I don't know how it didn't endure, obviously, but it was still.
Well, I don't know. As from my gaming experience, I don't see why I would want that. But I mean, I guess some people might. Either way, it didn't work out for them. Yeah. But the guy had a friend who had one, or he remembered it or something, and he was able to get his friend to reprogram it. Yeah, to do what you were saying. But that's where it came from. So it was this old dead technology that was able to be repurposed for something that was insanely useful for him. He worked at Adult Swim.
Okay.
And so he was doing on what's that show called? Seth Green.
Robot Chicken.
Oh, God.
Robot Chicken. Yeah, he worked on Robot Chicken. So he's sitting there, and it's just one guy.
Yeah.
Just one guy doing that. And he had to walk back and forth from the stage to the camera. Over and over again. Once he had that, he didn't have to walk back and forth anymore. He could just stay at the stage or stay at the camera or whatever.
That's why it's called the power glove. You use the power.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool. It was pretty impressive. But I mean, it shows the value of streamlining little things. I mean, like I use like a Wacom stylus, just like many people do, and I have a little ring and a thing that like I never have to put it down.
You have a power ring.
No, I'll show you when I'm done. But like I have it so that I never have to put the pen down.
Yeah,
I could like use the hands.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah, flip it up, and then that's how I do all my
tethered.
design. Yeah, I'm tethered.
Yeah,
and that's how I prefer it.
Yeah.
I mean, are there any other like streamlined things that you've kind of learned unconventionally in the illustration or animation world?
Well, I mean, imagine. So, for example, let's say this desk that I'm at, or this table, is an animation set, and this microphone is the camera, and I'm animating the things in front of me. I've actually worked on commercials where I was doing stop motion animation myself, and you have to squeeze in. I would have to squeeze in between the microphone, which is the camera, and this desk, reach across and animate characters that are at my arm's length, and then sneak out of the way, not hit the camera,
right,
and take a picture, and then keep doing that for 12 hours, 2 days, 3 days, a week. If you want to go into stop motion world, it's like just all those kind of conventions are insane. Like the stuff that you have to do, you have to make little pop-up holes in the set and crawl through them and crawl on the set to get to a character to move it, and then crawl back down and then actuate your camera shutter. So yeah, it's nuts. I literally had a shot where I literally had to have my chest pressed against the table, arms reached out, and animating characters with the camera right behind my head, and I couldn't touch it.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's
That
so
was nuts.
tedious.
Yeah,
yeah.
that
You
sounds like
have
kind of a nightmare.
patience.
Yeah.
You obviously have patience. You look at your drawings and
Yeah, they're
Oh,
kinda
yeah.
I mean,
insane.
you do a lot with like some of the details on this. I don't know if you guys could see it. It's very detailed, and you use pen quill. Or, use quill.
What's a quill? Yeah, dip quill and a brush and
Dipped
India
quill.
ink. Yeah, that one's a pretty nutty one, especially if you look at the face.
Gosh, I know that's so cool. I know I'm hogging it. You guys should definitely be seeing this.
Yeah, and that's a drawing. That's not computerized. It's not a printout. It's OG.
So I wanted to ask you, okay, so like with that drawing and with this, is this a painting?
The cute. Yeah, that's a
yeah.
painting.
Yeah.
Gouache, right? Is that gouache?
Yeah, that's gouache.
This gouache painting in that drawing. I like how you kind of go back and forth, and then here, this is another example of one that's more similar to that drawing.
Yeah.
And the edges are different, kind of. You know, like this is more organic.
Okay.
This seems, to me at least, it seems like you weren't going for something quite as perfect
As anal retentive.
as anal retentive.
Yeah.
But it totally works.
Yeah.
For the piece. And that's to me, I would just I feel like I don't see a lot of artists that do that. There's so many artists that you can almost tell who it is because of how much they're trying to keep the edges, you know, either straight or be more organic or not caring or whatever. So it's,
Well, I think brushstrokes are definitely. It's kind of like if you hear a guitar tone. Like if you hear Eddie Van Halen do one note, you're like, oh, okay, that's Eddie Van Halen. He calls that the brown sound, right? And or if you hear a certain, like a bass player that you really like, and he hits a note, you know, on his bass, and you're like, oh my God, that's that so-and-so bass player. You know, everyone has their own flavor or style. One of my all-time favorite artists, Frank Frazetta, you know, he was really good about, he could literally do a painting in like an hour for a book cover or something. And because he knew he was such a good illustrator, such a good draftsman, and he could literally put one brushstroke down on a character and it would just be perfect and amazing. Another guy is Sargent. You know, Sargent is a master of just beautiful brushstrokes and keeping things loose. But when you really look at them, well, when you're not really looking at them, they look perfect, tight, like a photograph, but even more magical because they're painted. If you really look at them, you start seeing the brushstrokes, and you're like, damn, this dude didn't even like, you know, he just like did one little quick thing. And me, if I'm doing a highlight or something, I'll typically spend a lot of time noodling it and, you know, really going into the minutia of it. I've always been very detail oriented. I don't know where that comes from. I think my dad did a lot of mechanical drawing, real technical drawing, and so I learned how to use, you know, mechanical pencils, mechanical pens, learning to make things look really pristine, like they were printed out. This is pre-computer too, so
Yeah.
so your dad was drawing for like manuals and stuff?
kind of, yeah. He did like medical equipment and weird things. A little bit of architecture. So
that's where the quill. Well, I mean, you got a lot of technical.
Yeah, that's
pens.
my little Fred Meyer's money
I like
bag.
that.
Yeah,
Actually,
that's
it's like not even branded. That's how
Yeah.
old this is. It's cool.
I bought some shirts at Fred Meyer one time, and I got home and I looked in the bag. I'm like, oh, this is like one of those little money bags that they walk around the store when they're carrying bills.
That's probably exactly what that is.
Yeah.
And I was not even about to like. It kind of matches your shirt too, which is pretty
there
rad.
you go.
But I was not even about to take that back because I'm like, this is so cool. I used it for a travel bag for a while. Put deodorant, toothbrush, and stuff. But then I'm like, this is perfect for my pencils. And
Yeah.
It
all
does
my
weirdly
things.
match Alex's shirt. It's like you predicted it.
Yeah, yeah,
It's the same yellow and gray.
yeah.
And you keep a cigar in there. I noticed that.
Yeah, I was doing some pumpkin carving in October, and some dude was walking around and he had a shirt that was cool, and I said, "Hey man, nice shirt." And he's like, "Oh, thanks. This is a cigar." Blah blah blah. I'm like, "Hey, if you got any extra cigars, drop them my way." You know, I'm carving this 100-pound pumpkin up at Edgefield, McMinimans, and sure enough, the guy came back in a couple hours and said, "Hey, here's your cigar." I'm like, "Dude, thanks, man."
Wow.
Nice.
So I've been looking for a good opportunity to smoke that. So
Hell yeah.
yeah.
So what do you do when you're doing a project and it starts getting dull or it's not working and you have to re-inspire yourself?
Oh boy, yeah, that's actually a good question. I mean, historically, sometimes, a lot of times, if I'm working on movies, there's so many things that you can literally just kind of start working on some other aspect of it or another character or something. Sometimes you need to. I mean, if you notice too, a lot of my materials are different. Some people are, they either just work on a computer or they're just a watercolor person or they're just a a pen and ink person. I've really tried hard over the years to kind of not necessarily master, but it's that whole, jack of all trades, master of none. I'm definitely a jack. I like art, and it doesn't really matter the tool that you're creating it with. It's just what you're going for. So whether it's colored pencils or gouache or ink or clay, I actually have an art show coming up in March. I'm really excited about. Love to talk about that later, but I'm going to try and get back into oils. And when I say back into oils, the ones that I tried when I was in college and in high school when I did 2 paintings. So that's kind of my next thing is oil. As far as, art, that's kind of like the highest art form in my eyes, is being a really good oil painter. It's kind of like doing bronze and sculpture. It's like the peak,
I wonder why. I mean, there's so many. Maybe it's because there's so many fantastic oil painters in the world.
Yeah,
I mean, you can create strange, silky, smooth textures with. I think that's it.
It's like the most. And oil comes from dinosaurs, right? I guess so. It's pretty built into our DNA. Yeah. So and bronze, the Bronze Age. That's when when it's really old. You're like, oh, the Bronze Age.
And oil's weird too. I remember when I was doing it. It didn't matter what kind of oil you're using. I'd use like olive oil and stuff. You know what I mean? Like as I was like a broke college kid, I'm like, use some canola oil, just throw that in there, and you make it work. It'll work somehow.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter.
Well, good for you for being able to use so many mediums. I mean, I think that's
it's fun. I think when you're a true artist, you basically whatever medium or tool you get, your creativity will go through that as a vessel, and it will come out into something, and. That's one thing that's fun too, going back to thinking about how to switch it up if you're kind of stuck. If you're on the computer or you're painting and you're like freaked out, go grab a cereal box, tear it apart, grab some tape and try and make something out of that. That will switch your brain out, is just to go completely a different direction. That giant skeleton we were talking about, that thing is made out of chipboard, as the exterior surface. There's a lot of, complicated armature underneath and machined aluminum parts that were done by amazing people. But at the end of the day, at the very top surface is basically like cereal boxes, tissue paper, glue, and pork chop bones.
Damn.
And talcum powder.
I wish you could see that sculpture, man.
It's pretty nuts.
So crazy looking. And it was how many feet tall?
22 feet tall, 19-foot arm span.
Damn.
Yeah, it's like a real monster.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah,
Oh.
Yeah, the head is probably, you're probably not going to be able to see my hands, but the head is literally like 3.5 feet tall, maybe 4 feet tall even.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome.
Impressive.
Damn, that's super cool.
Yeah. Definitely the biggest sculpture I've worked on. I worked on an 8-foot by 10-foot rhinoceros flying out of a building.
What?
Once. That was kind of cool. Yeah. So, you do that sometimes. You work on giant flying rhinoceros.
I was going to kind of ask you, like, what's the most bizarre project you've worked on? But that seems like that could be it.
Yeah, well, I worked for a children's book company for about 7 years called Flying Rhino. Brought one. Yeah, so we can segue to that if you want.
Yeah.
So after Disney and Will Vinton's, I actually worked for a shoe company for a while in town, Avia, for a year. I got asked by a couple old colleagues from Will Vinton's to join their children's book company. And I've always been a big fan of children's books. I've always wanted to do my own, be a children's book illustrator. I think a lot of artists, when you mention children's books, it's always a really fond thing in their heart, because we all have fond memories of reading books when we're kids. And as an artist, you're like, oh, I'd like to do that one and inspire children, of the next generation. So, I worked for this company called Flying Rhinoceros here in Portland, and was art director there in the end before I left. And but we did. I probably worked on about 20 different books, doing everything from doing Photoshop, acrylic paintings. This is one of the books I brought. It's called Munchy Crunchy Bug Book. This was kind of crazy. This was all fully illustrated in using acrylics and a combination of Photoshop. And so this was pretty cool. This was the first book that I did with that company where I got to do all the characters and all the backgrounds. And, I did all the layout in Illustrator. And
Dang.
So that was pretty wild. We also ended up working with the Smithsonian. Whoa. And Orkin Pest Control, if you can believe that. They actually made a traveling insect semi-truck. So I actually, that was probably the biggest project I ever worked on. I actually had to take a full-size semi-truck, the cab and the trailer, and put our artwork on it. On the outside, on the inside, it bumped out. There was a giant 30-foot long praying mantis on top. There was a 30-foot long caterpillar inflatable that you had to walk through to get into the truck. That was kind of nuts designing that.
That's awesome.
And then also as part of our building, I got asked to do a sculpture of our logo character, which is basically this giant, marauding flying rhino with a biplane and a scarf. And we actually did a giant sculpture of that and mounted it to the outside of the building, which was located on like 13th and Overton, so like pretty close to here.
Yeah,
so,
it's right around the corner. Damn.
Yeah.
So you said you got a show coming up, but have you had shows in the past? You were saying something about how you worked on building shows a lot, but then ended up not having them, like solo shows or ones that you throw yourself.
Yeah, so I've done a lot of work for other companies. I worked for Disney, I worked for Wolventons, I worked for Leica, worked for Flying Rhinoceros, worked for Avia, worked for a couple other smaller places doing weird stuff. And I was always working on somebody else's project. And so as an artist who has their own voice, I actually it was kind of weird. There's an animation company in Portland that I actually met my wife at, Shilpa, and one of my really best friends, this guy named Ben Birch, who's an amazing artist too. And there was this guy named Ben, another Ben. Bens are pretty awesome, so you got to reach out. Yeah. Yeah, I actually helped my friend Ben move one time, and he had a roommate named Ben, and we were staying on the second floor. We were on the second floor of this church, literally once again like 5 blocks from here, and we're all out on the whatever you call the landing, I guess, on the stairwell. And his neighbor's name was Ben, so there was 4 of us Bens on this 4x4 little landing in the stairwell, and we're like, okay, this is too weird. So I just remind everyone that I was the oldest Ben, so I was the elder Ben. So so I always, I throw that card. But what was the question again, real quick? I totally
you got there. Upcoming.
Oh, an upcoming art show. Yeah. So I started working with this guy Ben, who I consider one of my best friends. And he kept showing me art. He's like, hey, man, I was the art director at the time, and he was doing some other stuff. And so he was always like, hey, man, can I show you my art? I'm like, yeah, cool, whatever. I always like, trying to help people out. And if I can do something for someone, I'm always try to be there for them. And I was like, dude, you should do your own show. You should do a show because your work's really good and all this. Fast forward a couple months, I'm in Astoria, and I'm at this gallery I really loved. It was called Lunar Boy Gallery at the time. And it was owned by this guy named Jimmy Pickering, who's a pretty amazing artist, if you guys want to look that up. But this lady who was the gallery owner started talking to me, and I mentioned I was an artist, and she saw my work. She goes, hey, man, I've got a show coming up in March. Do you want to be part of that? I'm like, yeah, March, it's my birthday. Let's do this. And so I reached out to my friend, the other Ben, younger Ben, and I said, hey, man, I got this art show. You want to do a show together, 2-man show? And he'd been doing a series of bird paintings. And so I said, we got to have a theme for our show. You're doing birds. I kind of want to do birds too. And I'm like, let's do a show called Flip the Bird. And we'll both do our take on birds, because his style is very graphic, kind of more 50s, mid-century style. And mine's a little more, I don't know, whatever, fanciful, fantasy, whatever. And so we basically started doing these art shows in Astoria. And so we made a party out of it. We did T-shirts, we did posters, we did postcards, we had DJs, we brought tons of people out to Astoria, we got a house, and we just made this big event. And so we basically, what was the term? We used to do radio interviews up in Astoria, and I said we're going to shake up this town like a snow globe. So Astoria, if you've ever been there or you have, in past years, it's a little bit of a sleepy, port town, and but it was just really fun to be up there. This really dreary, weird, cool place where they filmed the Goonies, and we have an art show. And back in the day, people were actually buying art, and we sold a bunch of stuff. I think we sold $10,000 worth of art during that show, which was awesome. And that's really hard to do now if anyone's out there listening.
Yeah. Do you think people are, why do you think people are buying less art right now?
Oh, man. I think part of that is because in the last 10 or 15 years, the prices of housing has gone so crazy.
Yeah, especially in Portland.
And we can get into that too. That's a whole nother ball of wax. But honestly, I think now people are worried about paying rent, worrying about paying bills, and their wardrobe.
Yeah.
Like, I think those are like the top, and food.
Yeah, for sure.
Art is, if they have to spend more than $50 for something, they're like, I could spend that on a pair of jeans or, cool hipster jacket or something. So
100%.
They always want those cool hipster jackets.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on all the people coming into Portland?
Oh man, that's a whole nother podcast. Maybe I'm a native.
Yeah,
I was born half a mile from here, so I have not moved around too much. I've worked in Florida a couple times at Disney, but I've basically lived in the same 25-mile radius my whole life. So I'm about as Oregonian as you can get. Like
and you're pissed.
I'm not super thrilled about it. But
they're bringing money in, and you have so many more customers now because of it, right? Because the people coming in have money, whereas the people who were here didn't.
Yeah, but they're not spending it on art that much.
What are they spending it on?
Hipster jackets and lattes.
But isn't that what the Oregonians were already fucking spending their money on to begin with? They're all just buying the same crap.
Yeah. Well, no. Portland. See, I don't know if you guys are from here or how long you've been here, but when I started coming, I grew up in about 25 miles west of here in a little, I don't even want to call it a town, but it kind of is called Mountaindale. There was a little county store there, but it was pretty podunky. It's out out towards the coast a little more, and so my first experience with Portland was coming down here in the late 80s. So I first started coming down here in 87. And when you said Portland to someone in the country, anywhere in the country, they would assume it was Portland, Maine.
Yeah, damn.
That's crazy. Well, we've all been here for over 20 years, but yeah,
you guys are kids.
Yeah, exactly.
You guys you're amateurs. I'll give you some street cred for that. 'Cause 20 years is good. Yeah, it's 2 decades. You got that under your belt.
I moved here when I was 7 months old, so I think
and your name's Ben, so geez. So you're good in my book, and we're all handsome guys with glasses. So,
but I got a yellow shirt, the same color as you. I'm cool, right?
No, it's all good. Yeah, I think the funniest thing I've ever heard in Portland was I was on Mississippi one time, and I'm sorry, I don't want to offend anyone because everyone's got their own style, and I'm probably one of the least stylish people I know. Usually I have long hair and a mullet or a mohawk or something, and so I look kind of conservative now, except for my shirt, which is kind of cool.
It is cool.
But I've always had long hair. I've always been kind of like, people always call me a stoner or metalhead or whatever, even though I've never smoked pot, even though I just looked like I smoked pot, like a lot of pot. But and I'm not
pot.
Yeah, they're like, you smoke pot, dude? I'm like, no, I just look like I smoke pot. But thanks, man. But so the funniest thing I ever heard was I was on Mississippi. This was probably 5 or 6 years ago, and there was a guy there. And I'm trying not to make fun of hipsters, but in the summer, I just don't see a reason to wear a lumberjack hat or whatever the
beanie,
whatever they are. It's a lumberjack hat. Lumberjacks used to wear
the checkered.
The flaps?
Yeah.
Like
not
Elmer
the flaps.
Fudd?
Okay. Just a knit hat.
A beanie,
knit,
yeah.
Okay,
is that a beanie?
Yeah.
That's how uncool I am. We just, I just know that lumberjacks wear those.
Yeah.
But this guy, and it was summertime. The guy had his beard, his lumberjack hat, and his hipster, roll-up jeans and stuff. I think part of it's just jealousy because I don't look good in skinny jeans. I'm 6'2", I weigh 220. I just don't look good in that stuff. So a lot of this is probably just jealousy. And I wasn't cool because we shopped at Fred Meyer's when I was a kid. And you can't get a lot of cool shit in Fred Meyer's in the 80s. So, that's probably my big beef. But this guy was talking to his buddy, and I was just literally walking by, and I overheard him. He goes, this isn't the Portland I remember. I remember when I moved here 4 years ago.
Oh, my God.
I'm just like, dude, you are kidding me.
Are you kidding me?
Man.
And I just walked by, and I think I did like an Asian girl thing. I was covering my mouth. I was like, oh, my God, that dude just said that.
Wow.
And I don't try not to call people bro much, but I was like, bro.
Yeah, that was a bro moment.
Dude.
Yeah,
first off, take your hat off because it's 85 degrees out. And check yourself.
That's hot for you.
That was pretty funny, though. That was funny. I was like, whoa, this isn't the Portland I remember.
When was that?
Like 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Forever ago.
That was the most, I feel like that was the most radical change, was from 10 years ago to 5 years ago. or so.
Last 10 years has been pretty. I think the Pearl. To me, the Pearl is really like the big one.
Well, they also just announced that the stadium that.
I know. I just saw that
right up the road from here.
What?
Yeah, Terminal 2, whatever. Like on the docks.
Diamond. They're calling it the Diamond something.
The Diamond.
Oh,
project.
they're building a stadium over there. You're saying?
Yeah, for the baseball.
Yeah,
like on this road, pretty much.
I didn't even know that.
It's gonna screw up this area. This area that we're at right now, it's already getting screwed up.
Well, this area is kind of the last holdout of Portland, really. It's because it's under the Fremont.
It's also industrial, which is probably why.
Just to give you an idea of how old I am, I don't think this bridge was here when I was born. The bridge that we're under, the Fremont Bridge.
That's pretty.
Check that.
Well, they used to be.
Yeah.
What was it, like Drugstore Cowboy, that movie? Yeah.
Yeah, that was filmed in this area.
Good representation of what this place used to look like.
Right. And I've never seen that movie, which I need to.
I've only really seen clips of it where they showed like the Lovejoy columns when those were that was actually a bridge that came through the middle of this area. And it was, totally different.
Okay, so was, let's walk down memory lane here. Was Quality Pie here when you guys moved here?
I don't know.
So if you go up onto 23rd, there's this creepy ass old building. It's kind of weird mauve, and it's boarded up with it's got this weird corner. It's kind of across from the hospital. It's not. Where is it? It's kind of between here and Lovejoy.
I know the area for sure.
Yeah, but anyway, there's this building. It's been unoccupied for about 15 years. I think it's the longest standing unoccupied building in Portland.
Why?
And it used to be this place called Quality Pie. So back in the 80s, when I started coming down here, going to college, that was the time when all the Bloods and the Crips had a big presence here in Portland. Like Portland actually was a Blood and Crips mainstay. Yeah. East Portland was pretty sketchy. I mean like really sketchy, like murders all the time, and skinheads. That was a big skinhead time too. It was like late 80s. And so you'd go to this place, Quality Pie, up the street, and there'd be like punk rock kids and skinheads, and you'd see people with like blue rags and stuff. And you're like, oh man, I kind of want a slice of pie, but this is kind of freaking me out a little bit. But it was open all night, so kids would be hitting up the goth clubs, doing the dance raves or going to metal concerts or something. You go to Quality Pie and hang out till 4 a.m. and get some pie. And that was before late. Pie. Like pie is kind of cool and hip in Portland now, but like pie in 1987, it was just like let's get some pie.
It's kind of weird because like we vaguely remember how punk was way bigger down in like the Chinatown area.
Yeah.
But now it's
Chinatown keeps it real. Like if you want to talk about old Portland, go to Chinatown like after 10 o'clock at night. That's what the Portland I remember is like.
Kind of.
You think so? I mean, we go there a lot. I've been there. I'm there frequently.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't know. It still feels a little different.
13th used to be gravel road with railroad tracks in it.
Yeah.
And everything was abandoned, and there was syringes and used condoms, and it was sketchy. And there was a lot of behind the train station that was just open fields and gravel, and I mean that whole area was like ripe for real estate. People,
makes a lot of sense.
Buying, because you could. I remember somebody telling me a story right across from the Moda Center. There's a really big 3-story brick apartment complex, and I remember when was this? It was a little while ago, but I remember somebody telling me they bought that whole building for $600,000.
Holy shit!
And it's like a 140 unit apartment complex.
Whoa!
You could buy a building down in Portland in the 80s for a couple $100,000. So it's just changed. I mean, this changed a lot. I used to work with a guy who was a sculptor in this area, and there's the old Myron Frank building, and he used to rent out the whole floor of the old Myron Frank warehouse for $200 a month in the 80s.
Dang.
Yeah. And okay, so I'm going to bring this back to art.
So we like ranting about this stuff too.
No, what's cool is, and somebody explained this to me once, so I kind of use it as part of my philosophy too, is I think, how Portland is becoming definitely like really popular, and it's basically a place that like people just want to come here now. They want to come. People are visiting here to do tours. So it's just, if not more popular now than Seattle or going to Paris. People are like, Portland is now a destination to do a vacation and tour and do stuff.
Yeah.
Back in the day, back in the 80s, and the Pearl is a perfect example. The reason the Pearl happened was because there's all these cheap old buildings that were, derelict, and they'd had their heyday back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and artists were coming in. And as you guys probably know, you probably can't afford like a $6,000 a month high-rise apartment, or an office space. So you find a cool old building that you can afford. You go in there and you make creative stuff. Mm-hmm. So that was the Pearl area was a home for a lot of artists. When you get a lot of artists in, you start getting a scene in there because people are having art shows. They're having outdoor things happen. People are coming down into those areas. Then you start bringing in little coffee shops and cafes. So artists are kind of the catalyst of like the cool area of a city. And if you look at the really cool parts of a city, other than like a sports venue or something, it's the art district, or it's the artistic part of that like really draws people in. And a lot of times what happens is those areas become popular, and then it drives the artists out and they go other places. That's why Portland is starting to get more creative in Mississippi, Alberta, Hawthorne. Those have been around for a while, but I remember on Alberta there used to be one cafe that you could go to, and there were no art galleries.
Yeah, it's definitely changed a lot, but I actually think this might be like the last area where, because you don't know it. And by the way, we're in like industrial Northwest right now.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of warehouses, and you don't know it, but you go into some of them and they are either music studios, the art studios, and they just don't look like it, but they are. It's also flooded with homeless people right now.
Oh yeah, sure.
Like the homeless issue in this area is like the worst I've ever seen it in Portland. I mean, they have like barbecues and sofas. It's like straight up a house without a house.
Well, and Portland does take care of their Portland people. I mean, they don't, and they do and they don't. I mean, you can literally, I remember driving by 405 taking pictures of, I've never seen so many people camping in tents. And they're not really camping, they're basically homeless.
Yeah.
But you'll see this tent shanty next to a 20-story high-rise that's going up. And just the dichotomy, or the contrast of that is kind of terrifying, and well, it's mostly terrifying, but
you see that most on Broadway, right by the train station. Like that's it. They have this huge, brand new, shiny building. Yeah. And down below is just people living on the street. And like I saw this guy, like he was in a suit. I don't know where he got the suit. He's like walking in the street, like looking at people. Like, okay, that's everything about this is bizarre.
Yeah. Well, some of the business people that are working on the 28th floor of the Bank Tower building look like that too. But
yeah, it's very true.
But they're all stressed out. They've had their fourth latte for the morning. So,
oh god,
yeah. But yeah, you guys are seeing that because you're like you said, you're kind of in the heart of that area too.
Yeah, I mean, it drives us crazy a little bit because we know inevitably we're gonna be pushed out of this space.
Yeah.
Like they're gonna boost up especially when they build that stadium down the road.
Oh yeah.
And then a bunch of other bars and clubs are gonna pop up around the area. They've already talked about a club down the street. It's just what happens.
Yeah.
But you gotta adapt.
Yeah. Even Beaverton is experiencing that a lot now too. I remember Beaverton, yeah, because really? I actually live in Cedar Mill, which is kind of, it's still Portland.
I used to live over there,
yeah. Yeah, I'm like right on the cusp of Portland, but Portland and Beaverton, and the thing that killed me over there was there was an Everyday Music in Beaverton that's been there forever, and they finally closed down. They got bought out by a liquor store, actually.
Wait, that was the one that turned into like a porn shop or something?
No. Well, the porn shop's right next to it. Yeah, it was still the porn shop moved in next to that. It's called Lovers. If any of you guys want to go check it out. But but they just somebody doubled the lease, and they're like, hey, we'll give you double the lease, and we want to put a liquor store in here. So they're like, okay, they're gone. And then the thing that really killed me was Beaverton Bakery.
Wait, that's gone?
Yeah, dude. And that's been there 90 years. Like when I got married, that's who made our cake.
Ooh,
I used to get, they had some good maple bars there.
Pretty famous bakery.
Yeah, Beaverton Bakery. Yeah, especially for weddings. Like that was, if you just went to Beaverton Bakery for your wedding cake, that was you're just gonna get a good cake.
I wonder what happened.
I don't know. Probably the owners, got up there in age and didn't want to deal with it, and the rent probably just got hiked up just enough.
It's easier for a lot of people, especially if you're getting there in age and you don't really want to do a traditional like succession plan where you bring in people and you have to deal with it. It takes time. It's like, just cut me a check and let me retire.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. I'm ready to do that right now. If somebody said, hey, here's $800,000 we'll give you for your location. we're going to tear your building down. I mean, they did that BSAWS. That was a big one for me too here in Portland, BSAWS, because that at the time that was the longest running establishment in Portland. So I'll just make it look like I just did that.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
We'll cover you. Yeah. Kick my camera, man.
Well, they opened up a new one though.
Yeah,
is it the same?
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, we can go on that. But anyway, let's get back to art. That kind of.
Yeah, can you tell us when your show is?
Yeah, so I'm actually really excited. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah.
Really excited about this. I might bring my phone out if you don't mind, because I want to kind of get this. But I finally made it over on the east side. There's this gallery called the Brassworks, really tiny little gallery, and there's an artist there named Gregory Hergert, and I just found him on Instagram, and I was like, God, this guy's stuff is cool, and he had this like really cool hip vibe, and he was doing a lot of scenes from Portland that kind of looked like they're from the 90s or early 2000s. And it's all like sexy girls with cell phones and sketchy dudes with tattoos, like checking them out, and homeless people and cats in boxes. But it had this like really young, fresh vibe. And I kind of started texting the dude a little bit. I'm like, dude, I like your work. Your painting's awesome. And looks like you've been doing it for a while. I go, how old are you anyway? Because I thought he was like some young hipster guy that just knew how to paint his ass off. And I was all jealous again. I was like, God dang it. Another hipster who can paint amazing. Yeah. And he said, oh, I'm 67. I'm like, oh, snap. Okay. Like he used to do cartoons for Penthouse magazine.
Dang.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Super, super cool. But this guy's an amazing artist. He's an amazing painter. So I met him. Super nice. He's got this cute wife named Robin. I'm gonna give a little props out here. But anyway, so I went to the gallery and I'm like, this is awesome. And we were talking. And they said, yeah, we're having a group show. We're really excited. This guy named Glenn Barr is going to be there in March as part of a group show. And Glenn Barr is a Detroit artist that I absolutely adore. I've got his books, and I've been following him for a while. And I was like, oh, dude, if I could, I paint. I'm just going to tell you, I paint. I would love to be in that show. I would go take out some hipster downtown Portland just to be in that show. Like I'd do that anyway. I do that for a latte probably too, but anyway, I was just like, yeah, man, I would just love to be in that show. And she's like, well, we're trying to get people up of that caliber and stuff. And I'm like, that's cool. Let me show you some of my work. Let me show you I can do this. And showed her some of my older work I'd done at this Lunar Boy Gallery. I did my buddy Ben and I, other Ben, who we did a show called Boob Tube Babes and Big Screen Bombshells. Wow. So it was all girls from TV shows or movies that we, pin up style. And so I showed her a painting of Barbarella I did. And she's like, oh, that's pretty. You did that? I'm like, yeah, I'll do that for your show too if you give me a chance. So next day she messaged me and goes, hey, you're in the show. So I'm like, oh my God, this is awesome. So yeah, it's early March. I don't know the exact day, but the show is called In the Valley of She. And the theme is 70s erotica. So, and I've done a lot of cartoon work and comics, and my style definitely is either like scary, sexy, or cute. So I do like doing sexy girls a lot. If anyone knows my style, that's kind of one thing I like to paint a lot or draw. But I've never done it more on the erotic side. Uh-huh. So it's going to be interesting for me to kind of amp up the sexy factor a little bit to fit in with that show. But I'm really excited to be playing, up against some of these other amazing artists like Gregory and Glenn Barr. And actually there's a couple other artists I just looked at. The roster is amazing. As soon as I get some information, I'll message you guys about it. But yeah, it's Brassworks. It'll be in March. It's a couple days before a big birthday that I'm going to have. I'm not going to say what number it is, but my birthday is March 10th.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, it's literally like 6 days before my birthday. It's the 3rd or 4th, I think.
Nice.
Yeah. But yeah, it's going to be a killer show. Super killer. I think there's 8 artists. There's only one girl, which I was a little sad about because, there's a lot of guys in the show. But this one girl, I think her, I'm going to look this up so I don't mess it up. But yeah, you guys will have to come to that show because it's going to be a killer.
We'd love to, man. We've been trying to go to more of these shows. And
it's kind of, the gallery is actually kind of in a space very similar to this building too. You got to go up some stairs, you got to go down a hallway, and you got to knock 3 times, and you got to,
a little window. What's the word? That stuff.
Yeah,
that's cool. We'll be sure to link out the show promo whenever if you have any links to that.
Yeah, that'll be really cool. So.
Is there any message you want to give out to young artists trying to come up, or regular artists doing this thing?
Yeah, I would go to school and be a business major and not do art. Don't do art.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, don't do art.
I totally get it, though. I totally get it. Yeah.
For sure.
No.
You could be a business major, learn how to run a business, and then just draw, and then probably make more money with your shittier drawings than talented artists who don't know how to capitalize on that, maybe.
Yeah. No, I always like working with young artists. I actually they had a Headbangers Con here in Portland a couple of weeks back, like heavy metal convention. And I just I was trying to get out of there, and I was talking to all these like cool heavy metal guys that I was fans of. And this young girl opened the door for me on my way out. And I was like, oh, thank you. And I just happened to be carrying this is another story, but I was carrying this artifact from one of the Megadeth album covers. And I happened to own this thing, and they were like, oh my God, what is that? And we started talking, and this woman was like, hey, my daughter's really into art. And so we kind of connected, and I actually met with them for coffee one time, and we were doing some drawing together, and I was just giving her tips and stuff. And, the mom was there too. And, but yeah, I always like to inspire young artists and tell them to keep pushing themselves, one big example is anime. All the kids are drawing anime now. Probably like all the kids that when I was young were drawing Warner Brothers and Disney stuff. Like that's a lot of my style comes from Warner Brothers, Disney, and then this weird blend of like Frank Frazetta, Brian Froud, Norman Rockwell, just there's a couple artists that like really influence Salvador Dali. I always tell them to push themselves. Like, anime is awesome. It's cool. Do it, but like develop your own style. Push yourself, do color, do backgrounds, and don't just get stuck drawing too. Like learn how to build stuff or sculpt, or if you do go to art school, take a metal class or take not heavy metal, but like, metal crafting, blacksmithing, printmaking, just expand your horizons. All the jobs I've done, if I was really good at one thing, I mean, maybe that would have kept me in a job, but I found that one of the things by being able to sculpt, being able to draw, being able to do computer work has allowed me to be employable. Because sometimes something will run out and there won't be a need for what you're doing, and you got to be able to do something else. So like right now, there's a lot of computer modeling going on and computer animation. And so traditional clay sculpting isn't as much of a needed thing as it was 10 or 15 years ago. So if you don't know how to do 3D computer modeling, which I don't, that's going to leave you out of a lot of jobs. So, trying to keep current, but also having a little bit of a wide knowledge of different types of materials or techniques so that, if something doesn't work out for you, that you have a backup plan.
Yeah, you don't want to be all pigeonholed into one medium, one style.
Yeah.
I totally see what you mean, though, about the anime thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
You got to broaden your horizons and just keep trying new different things. Yeah. At one point, someone invented that anime style.
Right.
You got to invent the next one.
Yeah, and unless you're going to go work for an anime company, or you're going to have, unless Miyazaki is knocking on your door going, hey, can you help me do, we're doing Spirited Away 2, can you work on that? You're like, oh my God, yeah, because I'm so good at drawing Totoro, or, No Face. Like, I know how to draw him perfectly. It's like, well, I need you, we're doing new stuff. I need you to do something new that's never been done before. Can you do that? Well, no, because I just draw this one thing.
Yeah, that's totally what they want. They want you to do new things.
So do that, be inspired by it, learn by it, but then grow and have a variety of things that influence you. If you have 20 things that influence you, that's going to make a really cool, unique version of what you are there for, or meant to be, and not just a copy of someone else. So, if you look at my art, like the last show I did was Frightmares. It was based on movies that scared us as a kid. Mm-hmm. So that's the reason you see Killer Clowns from Outer Space or Flying Monkeys from Wizard of Oz. I am doing, I've got a couple portraits of other characters, but a lot of these other illustrations that you're looking at, like the girl with the pen and ink or the painting, those are just out of my head. So I prefer to do stuff out of my head, to create my own thing. But it seems like nowadays fan art is more popular, and somebody would rather buy a drawing that somebody did of Batman or the Joker or, Deadpool
for sure,
or Totoro versus some new creation that somebody just made up. So that's one trend I see too, is the fan art aspect is kind of overtaking, and that's where pop culture comes from, is things that are popular. So I think that is like at the peak right now, where people want stuff that they've seen before, they're comfortable with. If I do something like for Halloween, I'll do a character, I'll make something up, I'll create this costume, I'll go out and they're like, oh, well, what are you? Or which character is this? I'm like, it's one that I made up. And that just does not compute with them. They're like, oh, well,
yeah,
yeah.
Like, you can't do that.
Yeah. I posted this thing I did on Facebook and everyone's like, oh, are you so-and-so from that so-and-so video game? I'm like, so-and-so, no. I made this up. Like, this is my own thing. Wow. And it just happens to have spikes on it.
Good for you.
Yeah. So
That's
like,
cool.
yeah, be your own person, you know, like do the cool, popular stuff too. It's totally awesome. I mean, I'll probably end up doing more of it because I want to sell my art, but you know, do your own thing too. So for sure, find a balance.
There we go.
I like that message.
Yeah.
And with that, we were actually about out of time.
Yeah.
So that was a perfect way to end it.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming
yeah,
on.
thanks for having
so
me.
much, man.
Super fun talking to you guys. And
that was great.
Yeah.
And thanks again, Cascade Street Distillery, for the South Sister Gin.
yeah,
We always
can-
appreciate
we
it.
can do it.
Yeah.
Cheers.
There we go. Appreciate the sips. I do like that gin. It's
It's good.
refreshing.
It's really good.
Yeah.
That being said, everyone have a good rest of your day, night, whatever it is, weekend, and Black Bulb out.
Peace.